You knew this whole time and you said nothing. How could you stand there and lie to my face?
I knew it was going to be a bad day the second I saw the scar. Not because of the scar itself. It was a nasty, reddish burn, running wrist to elbow, the kind you get wrestling a deep fryer, but because of the person wearing it. It was Veronica Thorne, the former HOA tyrant, fresh out of the state pen, and she was staring at my cabin like it had personally insulted her entire family lineage. She'd gone down 2 years ago for what the judge politely called creative reallocation of homeowner funds. She skimmed close to $90,000 from our subdivision's beautification budget. And now, she was back in Whispering Pines, walking proof that some people simply don't learn humility in correctional facilities. My name is Frank Peterson, and this cedar log cabin is my sanctuary. My grandpa, a Vietnam vet, built it with his own 2 hands back in the late 60s. It's not just a house. It creaks, it smells like wood smoke and old books, and it stands for everything Veronica and her HOA stood against: independence, history, and a deliberate lack of beige vinyl siding. This is where I drink my coffee, battle a local raccoon named Rusty over my tomatoes, and generally try to trade sirens for crickets. That piece shattered the moment her beat-up black sedan coughed to a stop across the street. I was up on a ladder, cleaning out the gutters, the kind of mundane, manly task that should be the peak of suburban drama. She climbed out of that car, and besides the prison kitchen burn, she hadn't changed. Still the same sharp, severe haircut that looked like it could be weaponized, still wearing a pantsuit that tried way too hard for a Tuesday morning in the middle of nowhere, and still wearing that sour lemon expression she perfected during her reign as the president from hell. If anything, she looked tighter, more coiled, like a spring waiting for the perfect moment to snap. Then she saw me, perched on my ladder. A slow, thin smile stretched across her face. It was the smile of a predator, not a neighbor. I just gave her a small, dismissive nod and went back to scooping damp leaves, figuring she'd take the hint. I was busy. I had important decisions to make, like whether to rewatch that documentary about Roman engineering or the one about deep-sea fishing. But Veronica doesn't do hints. She marched across the street, her heels clicking on the asphalt like tiny little hammers of impending doom. She stopped right at the edge of my lawn, separated by the little 3-foot split-rail fence my grandpa also built. A fence she once tried to cite me for, claiming it was half an inch too high. Violating some obscure bylaw, she probably wrote herself on a cocktail napkin. "Peterson," she rasped, her voice like gravel in a cheap blender. "Why are you still here?" I leaned the ladder against the cabin wall, wiping my hands on my jeans. "Veronica," I said deadpan. "I see you're not." She flinched, a tiny, almost imperceptible twitch around her eyes. "Touch a nerve." "Good." My sentence was a gross miscarriage of justice, orchestrated by my enemies, she snapped. "Right," I replied. "The enemies of overpriced, no-bid gazebo permits are a powerful bunch. I hear they have a secret handshake." Across the street, my neighbor Dave, part of the porch Greek chorus of neighborhood gossips, made a noise that was half cough, half stifled laugh. Veronica's head whipped around to glare at him, and Dave immediately became fascinated by a single crack in his driveway. Her attention snapped back to me, the anger now palpable. "This property should have been condemned and demolished years ago," she declared, waving a dismissive hand at my cedar logs. "My cabin, the place where I spent every summer of my childhood." My grip tightened on the ladder. Funny, I managed to keep my voice steady. The county inspector called it a rustic gem with historical character. But I guess you know better than him. Regulations are changing. Needs are changing, she hissed. Whispering Pines is moving into the future, and there's no room for dilapidated shacks holding back progress. She gestured vaguely towards the woods behind my property. "We need better access. Emergency access. A fire lane." And there it was. The scheme. The rumor I'd heard, that a developer wanted to build luxury condos behind the tree line, suddenly crystallized. A fire lane would, by amazing coincidence, have to go directly through my living room to give them the second access point the county required for their permits. "There's a paved road 50 feet to the north and another one 100 feet to the south," I pointed out. "The fire department seems to manage just fine." "That's not your decision to make," she shrieked. "This is for the good of the community." "The community of your bank account, you mean?" I asked. The mask dropped. Her face was pure, unadulterated rage. She pointed that scarred finger at me. That cabin is a blight, a fire hazard, and it's coming down. One way or another, Peterson. I'm advising the HOA now. She lied, brandishing her clipboard. I'll see to it. Then she did it. She took a deep breath, puffed out her chest, and let out a scream. Not a quick yelp, a full-throated, horror movie shriek, right there on the sidewalk. It was a performance, designed to paint me as the threatening recluse and her as the poor, concerned citizen. It was the kind of scream you'd put on the thumbnail of a viral video. I just stood there, holding my ladder, and waited for her to finish, gasping for air. You done? I asked calmly. Because you're scaring the birds. The question was, what was her next move? She wasn't the type to scream and walk away. That scream was the overture. I knew she was planning something. Veronica, isn't the type to give up. The quiet that followed her sidewalk opera was the kind that makes the hair on your arm stand up. So I prepared. I checked the old survey stakes. And I set up a couple of new trail cams I had in the garage, aiming one at my driveway and the other at the electrical box on the side of the cabin. It felt a little paranoid, but with Veronica, paranoia is just good sense. The first move came on a Thursday night. Late, around 1 in the morning. I was reading a book when the power went out. Not a flicker, a sudden, total blackout. Silent. I grabbed my mag light, Grandpa's old one, and went to the window. Across the street, Dave's porch light was still on. It wasn't the grid. It was just me. My stomach tightened. I crept outside. Sure enough, the heavy metal door of the electrical box was hanging open and the main breaker was flipped down. Someone had walked right up to my house and cut the power. This was trespassing. This was a direct physical act intended to intimidate me. I flipped the breaker back on. The cabin's exterior lights flooded the area. I scanned the yard, nothing. But then I remembered the trail cam I'd mounted on the big oak, aimed right at the power box. I walked over. The camera was gone. Smashed. Little pieces of black plastic littered the ground. They hadn't just taken it, they destroyed it. They knew I might be watching. They were thinking ahead. And that was the most chilling part. This wasn't just a tantrum. This was planned. I realized I was fighting a ghost. I had no proof, just a flipped switch and a smashed camera. How do you fight someone who plays in the dark? Fine, I thought. If she wants to play in the dark, I'll bring my own lights. I drove into town and bought a full, 4-camera, high-definition security system with night vision and cloud storage. I mounted one camera under the eaves, another on the back corner, a third on the garage, and the fourth, the most important one, I mounted high up on the side of the cabin, disguised in a fake birdhouse, with a perfect, undeniable view of the electrical box. I ran the wires myself, neat and tidy. Let her try something now. I'd have it in glorious 1080p. The escalation came about a week later, and it was more creative than I could have imagined. Saturday afternoon, I heard a high-pitched buzzing sound, like a giant, angry mosquito. I went to the window. Hovering about 50 feet above my roof was a drone. A serious, black piece of equipment, its camera pointed directly at my cabin. Aerial surveillance. A whole new level of harassment. I grabbed my phone and started recording. The drone zipped around to the back, hovering over my 2 big propane tanks. Then I saw it. Something dangling beneath it, held by a little mechanical claw. The claw opened. A small, clear plastic bag tumbled down, landing in the dry grass not 5 feet from the tanks. The drone shot up into the sky and zipped away toward Veronica's side of the neighborhood. I approached the bag cautiously. Inside, oily rags and a book of matches. An insta-arson kit. A plant. A setup. Her plan was suddenly terrifyingly clear. Step 1. Drop the evidence. Step 2. Make an anonymous call to the fire department reporting a suspicious person trying to set a fire. Step 3. They arrive, find the evidence, and find me, the disgruntled homeowner. It was designed to discredit me, paint me as unstable, and give her the ammunition for her condemnation crusade. I didn't panic. I went back inside, grabbed thick rubber gloves and long barbecue tongs. I went back out, carefully picked up the baggie, and placed it inside a larger Ziploc bag. This was evidence, my evidence. I took detailed photos of the bag, the rags, and the exact spot where it landed. Then I looked up at the birdhouse camera. Its little red light was on. It had seen the whole thing. The drone, the drop, everything. A slow grin spread across my face. She thought she was being clever, playing in the shadows, but she had just delivered the rope, and I was pretty sure she'd just used it to hang herself. The question of when to call the cops was getting clearer. You call the cops when you can hand them a case tied up with a neat little bow. And Veronica had just handed me the ribbon. I knew Veronica wouldn't stop. Her brand of evil runs on impatience. When she didn't get an immediate panicked reaction from me, she pushed harder. Her next move came on a Wednesday morning. A big, white unmarked van pulled into my driveway. Two men got out. Big, beefy guys who looked like they gargled with gravel. One of them, with a faded bulldog tattoo, had a clipboard. The other was already pulling a chainsaw out of the back. I met them on the porch. "Can I help you, gentlemen?" The bulldog grunted and shoved the clipboard at my chest. "Emergency abatement order," he mumbled. "We're here to clear the hazardous trees. Fire risk." I took the clipboard. The header read, "Whispering Pines County Public Safety Board. That agency doesn't exist. Not here. Not anywhere." It was cosplay paperwork, full of fancy legal jargon, signed by a J. Smith, Chief Compliance Officer. It smelled fishier than a bait bucket left in the sun. "I haven't received any notification about this," I said, handing the clipboard back. "And my trees are perfectly healthy. Don't need no notification for an emergency order," Bulldog snapped, getting impatient. "Now stand aside. We're paid to clear the property line." He pointed the clipboard at the row of ancient pines, the very trees that stood exactly where Veronica's imaginary fire lane would go. His partner fired up the chainsaw. The roar shattered the morning quiet. "Turn that off," I said, my voice low and steady. "You are not cutting down a single branch on my property. This order is fake, and you're trespassing." Bulldog's face turned purple. "Listen, old man," he snarled, stepping right up into my personal space. "We got our orders. Move, or I'll move you." He shoved me, a hard shove, meant to knock me off balance. 3 phones came up at once from the sidewalk. Dave, Mrs. Harlow, and others. The porch chorus was recording. I braced myself. I barely moved. "That was your first mistake," I said calmly. He swung. It was a clumsy, telegraph punch. I ducked under it easily. As he swung again, I sidestepped, and his momentum carried him forward. He tripped over one of my porch planters and went down with a loud crash. His partner killed the chainsaw, looking nervous. Dave came jogging across the street, holding a tire iron. "Everything okay over here, Frank?" he yelled. Mrs. Harlow was clearly on the line with 911. The game was up. The goons scrambled to their feet and peeled out of my driveway, leaving a strip of rubber and a very angry-sounding chainsaw behind. The birdhouse camera had a perfect front row seat to the entire encounter. The fake order, the threat, the shove, the swing. Assault, trespassing, and attempted property damage, all documented. The internal debate was over. This had gone far beyond a simple neighbor dispute. It was time to find out who Veronica Thorne's parole officer was. It took some robotic navigating, but I finally got through to a human in the parole department. I explained the situation in calm, measured tones. Harassment by a recent parolee, escalating to property damage, trespassing, and physical assault by third parties. That got their attention. 2 hours later, Parole Officer Ramirez rolled up. Tall, neat mustache, professional. He was Veronica's PO in the flesh. I sat him down in my kitchen and showed him everything. The drone footage, the baggie of fake arson materials, and the clip of Bulldog shoving me. "Mr. Peterson," Ramirez said when I finished. "This is comprehensive. Your grandpa was a wise man. But he cautioned me. I didn't have definitive proof Veronica herself was directly responsible for hiring those men." "I didn't say there's nothing we can do," Ramirez corrected me. "Her parole has strict conditions. No contact with the victims of her previous crime, which includes the HOA and by extension its members, and no criminal intimidation. This pattern of behavior is enough for me to put her on official notice." He went outside and pounded a small, bright red sign on a stake right at the edge of my lawn. "No trespassing. Violators will be prosecuted." Per Ramirez. "Here's how this works now," Ramirez said. "If she so much as puts 1 foot over that property line, if she speaks to you, if she sends someone else to speak to you, you don't engage. You get it on camera, and you call 911 immediately. A violation like that, crossing a direct order from her PO, is a one-way ticket back to prison, no questions asked. You just live your life. Let her make the mistake people like her always do. The ball was in Veronica's court now. Ramirez had built a cage and left the door open. All she had to do was not walk into it. But I had a feeling her ego wouldn't let her stay out. First, I needed the final piece of evidence. I had the motive and the intent from Veronica's email, but I needed the full confession. I called Tim Roswell back. Tim, I said, to show there are no hard feelings, I'd like to have you and your wife over for burgers this Saturday. Just a casual dinner. Tim, terrified of Veronica's reaction, eventually agreed. Food is the ultimate diplomatic tool. Saturday arrived. Perfect day for psychological warfare. I set up the grill. On the small table, next to the salt and pepper, I casually placed my cell phone, propped up, hitting the voice record button. Tim and his wife arrived, nervous. As we sat down to eat, I brought up the HOA. So, Tim, I said, this developer deal Veronica is pushing, it sounds like a lot of pressure. Tim finally broke. She's been relentless, he whispered, lowering his voice. The developer is offering a 7-figure sum to the HOA for the access road. Karen gets a massive consulting fee if it goes through. He admitted Veronica had been the one to draft the fake abatement order and had given it to him to find contractors. She keeps telling us that your cabin is the only thing standing in the way of a huge payday for the entire community. My phone, sitting inches away, was recording every self-incriminating word. The confession was better than I could have hoped for. And then it happened, right on cue. From my vantage point at the table, I could see the street. Veronica's front door opened. She saw Tim's car parked in my driveway. Her puppet, her nervous, controllable HOA president, was having a friendly barbecue with the enemy. Her body went rigid. Her face, even from 50 yards away, was a thundercloud of fury. She started marching across the street. Straight for my property. Straight for Ramirez's little red sign. The trap was set. Tim, I said, cutting him off calmly. I think your boss is here. Tim and his wife turned around. Their faces went pale. Veronica had reached the sidewalk. She was standing inches from the red sign, vibrating with anger. Timothy, she shrieked. What is the meaning of this? Fraternizing with the enemy. I stayed seated. I picked up my phone, making sure the camera was visibly pointed at her, and hit the video record button. Veronica, I said, my voice as level as a billiard table. You're awfully close to my property line. I'd be careful if I were you. Officer Ramirez was very specific about the rules. The mention of her parole officer sent her over the edge. Ramirez, you think you can hide behind him? You think a little sign is going to stop me? She took the step, one deliberate, defiant step over the invisible line, her shoe landing firmly on my grass. She had crossed. I kept the first phone recording her, but with my other hand, I pulled my second phone from my pocket, dialed 911, and set it on the table. The dispatcher's voice would be recorded along with everything else. You are trespassing, Karen, I said, my voice never rising. You were given a lawful order to stay off this property. You are violating your parole. You need to leave now. Give me that, she snarled, lunging not at me, but at the phone. It was a clumsy, desperate grab. I didn't have to do a thing. I just leaned my chair back. Veronica, in her forward lunge, missed the phone completely. With nothing to stop her momentum, she pitched forward and went head first into my rhododendron bush. A soft, muffled thump followed by muffled cursing. Grandpa's rhododendron eats villains for breakfast. Her legs kicked in the air for a moment before she disappeared entirely into the foliage. All you could see were her sensible pumps sticking out of the leaves. The distant sound of sirens was getting closer. The flashing lights were just coming around the corner. I stood up, calmly, walked over, and pointed my camera down into the bush to get a clear shot of her tangled in the branches. Ma'am, are you okay? I asked for the benefit of the 911 operator. You seem to have fallen into my shrubbery. The arrival of the sheriff's department was efficient. Officer Ramirez arrived quickly, took one look at the legs sticking out of the bush, and let out a long, weary sigh. They had to physically haul Veronica out. She came out sputtering, covered in leaves and twigs. Ramirez stepped forward. Karen, shut your mouth, he said, his voice quiet, authoritative. You're done talking. He turned to the deputies. She's my parolee. This is a direct violation of a no-contact order. He has it on video. Her parole is hereby revoked. The deputies cuffed her. The fight drained out of her completely. As they were putting her in the back of the squad car, Tim Roswell found his voice. "Officer," he stammered. "There's more. She was blackmailing the whole HOA board. It's all tied to a developer. I have emails." The investigation grew quickly. With my video evidence, Tim's testimony, and the mountain of other proof, Veronica had no defense. She was sentenced to serve the remainder of her original term, plus extra time for the new charges of conspiracy, fraud, and witness intimidation. The court issued a lifetime restraining order, barring her from ever contacting me or setting foot in the HOA again. My little battle for my cabin had exposed something much bigger and uglier. The developer project collapsed. The land behind me was left as quiet woods. A month later, a nice woman from the County Historical Society came to my door. My cabin, the little log house that stood up to the bullies, had become a local legend. They wanted to declare it a protected county landmark. Its official designation, a symbol of community resilience. I stood on my porch steps, the sound of my neighbors' laughter drifting on the air. I thought about my grandpa. He knew that the world had bullies in it. The core question, when to stand your ground and when to call the cops, had found its answer. You do both. You stand your ground long enough to give them the rope, and you call the cops to make sure they use it. I raised my bottle of beer in a silent toast to Grandpa, to stubbornness, and to really, really big rhododendron bushes. The line is the line. Call to action. What about you? What was the moment you realized you had to stop being polite and start being documented? Have you ever had a villain walk right into a trap you set? Tell me your story of standing your ground and getting justice in the comments below.